everyone. My name is Tara. I am the Outreach Project Manager with Nova Education, and I'm so excited to host today's virtual field trip. So this month, Earth Month, Nova premiered 2 films about climate change. Weathering the Future, which addresses how communities across the country are innovating and adapting to the effects of climate change, and Chasing Carbon Zero, which looks at ways that we can reduce our carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. You can watch both films online on YouTube and the PBS Nova website, or you can stream them on the PBS app. So this virtual field trip is part of Nova's Climate Across America initiative, which spotlights how climate change is affecting communities across the country, from hotter heat waves to rising sea levels, and the innovative solutions being implemented across the climate, being implemented to address the climate crisis. So today we are going to learn all about one of the solutions that we highlight in Weathering the Future, wastewater recycling. So how can we turn contaminated wastewater, that makes me think of what we flush down our toilets, how can we turn that yucky water into fresh drinking water? And how can that adaptation make a super dry place like Orange County, California, resilient against drought? So to help us tackle these questions, we are lucky to have a very special guest with us today, who is in charge of making sure that the 2.5 million residents of Orange County, California, get clean drinking water. And that is the Executive Director of Operations at the Orange County Water District, Mehul Patel. He's going to take us behind the scenes at the world's largest water reuse facility, the Groundwater Replenishment System, to learn what it takes to turn nasty sewage into pure drinking water. So I am so curious. Hi, Mehul. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Tara. Nice to see you again. Good afternoon where you are. Good morning if you're out here on the West Coast like I am.
Exactly. That's right. It is afternoon for me, morning for you guys out there. So just a quick reminder before we dive into the presentation, if you have any questions for Mehul, please drop them in the Q&A section if you're on Zoom, or into the comment section on Facebook and YouTube, and we will try to get to as many as possible at the end of the session. So with that, Mehul, I will pass it off to you.
All right. Thank you, Tara. Let me pull up my presentation first. All right, good afternoon, everyone, or like I said, good morning if you're here in California like I am. So today we're going to hopefully talk about something that you find pretty exciting and different. I know it might not sound so pretty, but it's something that is definitely very necessary, especially in parts of the U.S. like the desert Southwest here, where we don't have an adequate supply of drinking water, especially during times of drought. So one of the things we want to do is find a new source of water. And so why not turn to wastewater? A water source that hasn't traditionally been used, but one that with science and technology, we can make just as good as any other drinking water source that we would pursue. So let's get started. So first, let me give a little background about myself. I went to school to become a civil engineer, but at an early age, I always had an interest in science and technology, especially math and science. And so I think one of the earliest memories I had was getting a goldfish bowl, like a lot of you might have, from the local fair, and then figuring out why does that water get dirty over time, and learning how to clean it up. Kind of got my interest in the environment and water in general, and led to a career I have today. And so, those of you who are interested in science or science and technology, there's a numerous amount of fields that you can go into for a future profession. So mine just happens to be one dealing with the environment through water and wastewater treatment. And it's allowed me to, first and foremost, be able to work outside. You can kind of see the photo on the bottom there is during construction of our treatment plant. We get to work out in the field, not always in the office. That's a nice thing about being in this field. And then allow me to visit other plants who are doing similar things to what we're doing, or where we can exchange ideas. So the photo there at the bottom left is a seawater desalination plant in Israel. So I was able to visit one there, in India and a couple other countries, to share ideas. And then, like most kids, especially most boys, we love construction equipment. So construction equipment's a big part of the way that we help manage the local water supply here, mainly our Santa Ana River, which we'll talk about later. So, everybody likes a big bulldozer. Okay, and so just a little bit more about me before we get into it. So, there's several ways to get into a career path, depending upon what you're into. Mine just happened to be one where I did go to college, and while I was in college, was able to do an internship that taught me a little bit more about water and wastewater treatment. And then when I pursued a second degree, a master's degree, I was able to participate in some research that the Orange County Water District was holding. And that helped me complete my master's degree, do a thesis on the research. And then that led to an internship here at the Water District in '96. And so I've been here ever since, almost 27 years going on now. And that turned into a permanent position, and then different positions along the way to where I am now to help manage all the district's operations. So let's get into a little bit about our topic today, especially the Orange County Water District. So the Orange County Water District is located in Southern California. If you're not familiar, we're about an hour's drive south of the Los Angeles International Airport, and about 15 minutes drive from Disneyland, which I think is more exciting. So that's really close by. And so we're here to protect the environment here in Northern Orange County and protect the water supply for 2.5 million people, and make sure that that water supply is not only plentiful, but free from contamination. And so what we're managing here is what's called a groundwater aquifer. And if you're not familiar with that, you can kind of look at the top left photo here. The way to think of that is that in different parts of the country, especially here in Southern California, there's naturally occurring large pools of water underground. They've naturally traveled there through the soil, through runoff, precipitation, and there's certain parts of the country where the soil allows for water to just seep right through and then accumulate underground. So here in Orange County, we have a huge accumulation, billions of gallons of groundwater that's accumulated over time, but that huge amount of groundwater doesn't always refill itself naturally through rain and rainfall. So the Orange County Water District has set up an operation to help refill that basin and manage the amount of water that's pulled out of there. We don't want to take more out than we're putting back in, so it's sustainable. And part of that is to do water reuse, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is taking a source of water that would normally not be considered part of the drinking water supply, using advanced technology, cleaning it up to beyond drinking water quality, and then reintroducing it back into the ground with other naturally occurring groundwater to help replenish our supply for 2.5 million people. And as part of that, we have to pay an extensive amount of attention to water quality, of course. We want the water to be as safe as possible, free from contamination. So there's a large amount of chemistry and a whole laboratory group that's involved, and a water quality group that's involved with help ensuring that our quality is where we need it to be. And then as part of that, and as part of the whole climate change issue that we're talking about today, there's environmental stewardship. So we have to be good stewards of the environment, take care of the environment, which also means making sure that we do have enough water in this groundwater aquifer. So hopefully you learn a little more about what a groundwater aquifer is and why it's so valuable in parts of the country where that is the main source of drinking water, like it is here in Southern California, especially in Northern Orange County. So let's talk about our topic today, recycled water. So if you're not familiar with recycled water, it's a pretty general term, but I think we need to start where it starts from, which is sewage, which some people might think is kind of icky and yucky, and yes, it can be, but sewage is generated from a variety of sources, but the best way to think of it is anything that leaves your house, the inside of your house. So we're talking about anything that goes down the drain in the sink, anything that goes down the drain in the shower, the toilets, the washing machine, the dishwasher, all of that ends up in a big sewer collection system. So underground throughout the country, cities have these huge tunnels and pipes that collect all that sewage from your home and also from businesses and take it to a centralized wastewater treatment plant, who puts it through an extensive amount of treatment. And then that water is normally discharged either back into the environment through lakes and rivers, or sent to another facility like we're going to talk about today, where it can be cleaned up to beyond drinking water quality and help become part of the drinking water supply. But a key thing to remember here is almost everything takes water. Anything that we make, anything that we manufacture takes water. So businesses, like you see in the middle top photo, power plants in the bottom left photo, they all need water as part of their process. It doesn't matter what they're manufacturing. In power plants in particular, you need a lot of cooling water. That's part of the process that generates electricity. You need to cool large amounts of heat that's generated. And so there's a push to use more recycled water rather than our normal drinking water supplies to free up those supplies for our normal drinking uses because it's of limited quantity when we have, especially when we have drought conditions. And then in certain parts of the country, especially if you live in the southwest of the US, specifically in California, we have a lot of these signs you'll see that are purple, and the pipes are purple. That designates that that water is recycled, not to the quality we're going to talk about today, but you can also treat wastewater to a lesser quality and then use that for irrigation, watering soccer fields, parks, freeway medians, some crops. So that's another way that you can use recycled water. And then ultimately, the greatest example of water recycling is our space program, whether that's at the International Space Station, on our space shuttles, any manned flight into outer space, there is no water. What they're doing is reusing everything that they generate, including their own urine. Everything is retreated to a high level and then used within the capsule. There is no water available in space readily. So that's kind of the inspiration. So, we're doing exactly what the astronauts are doing, but we have to do it on a scale that's probably 10,000 times larger. So that's the key to making this whole thing work. So what we're going to talk about today is what's called the Groundwater Replenishment System. So this is a facility that's an advanced water treatment facility, we call it. So it's a large treatment plant here in Fountain Valley, California, in Orange County, that treats water that's been through normal wastewater treatment that would normally be discharged to the Pacific Ocean in this area, and treating it to a high level, almost distilled quality. And that's what we call potable reuse, because we're reusing the wastewater for potable purposes, in this case, to replenish the groundwater aquifer. And we've been doing this since 2008 at this facility, and we've generated over 400 billion gallons of purified water. And we even have the distinction of having a Guinness Book of World Record for producing the most amount of recycled water in 24 hours. And that was 100 million gallons and over 100 million gallons in a day. So that's been a nice little accomplishment for all of the staff here, and a way to show that we can do this on a large scale as one of the ways to combat water scarcity issues through climate change. So let's talk a little bit about the treatment that's done. So, we want to make this water that would start it out as wastewater that some people might think is gross or yucky, and we want to clean it up. Well, we have technology to clean it up, but it can't all be done with one technology. So we use 3 specific technologies, and that helps us have what we call redundancy, more than one step. So we have some additional safeguards. So the first step is microfiltration. And the way to think of microfiltration is like a hollow straw, like a drinking water straw you would use to drink your soda or your drink from. But in this case, the straw itself has holes on the sidewall, microscopic holes. So if you put the straw in a cup and you close one end and you suck from the other end, or provide a suction, you can pull the water into the holes that are on the side of the straw and accumulate in the hollow center. And anything bigger than those holes will get stuck on the outside. In this case, the holes are so small, they're 300 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. So very, very small. So let me show you a quick example of what one of these looks like. So this is one of them that we've cut open. Normally it's a big cylinder, but we've cut it open so you can expose these individual little fibers. You can see how small they are, almost like spaghetti fibers. But in the sides of these, and they're hollow in the center, although it's hard to see, and the sides are microscopic holes. If we were to quantify it, it's 0.1 micrometer or 0.2 micrometer. So very, very small. The holes are so small that if we apply enough suction pressure to get the water through the filter, we can remove bacteria and the larger particles, so that the water can then move on to the next step, which is kind of the heart of the treatment. So this is the first step, microfiltration. And those of you maybe watch Sesame Street, kind of looks like Beaker, with the hair. So that's one cut open there. Let me bring the presentation back up. So here's a little video that'll kind of show you the concept that we're talking about. So the video shows, this is a little animation that shows the particles trying to get inside the filter, but can't make it past these microscopic holes, while the water can, and continue on to the inside of the little fiber itself. So here's the little microfiltration fiber that I just showed you. This is a animation, you can see those little weird bug things. Those are kind of bacteria and other microorganisms that are naturally going to be found even in treated wastewater that we want to remove. And so this step helps remove those. Those are fairly large. You can see how large they are compared to the holes. So they're easily removed by this process. So this is just one step in the 3-step treatment process. So our next step, which is really the heart of the treatment, this is what we call reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis is a technology that's been around for a long time. It's the same technology they use to desalinate seawater, remove salt from seawater and make it drinkable, which happens a lot, especially in arid countries, especially around the Gulf, the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, and in the Middle East. So what you see on the left here is a picture of the reverse osmosis process. It typically is these white fiberglass tubes, 8 inches in diameter, and inside are several of the reverse osmosis membranes. And the reverse osmosis membranes are made of a very similar material that we saw in the microfiltration, but instead of being tiny little straws, they're flat sheets. But what makes this process unique is the holes. Remember, we talked about the holes in microfiltration were about 300 times smaller than a human hair. Now we're talking 1,000 times smaller than even that. So these holes are so small that they'll actually be able to retain or remove the salts, which is one of the hardest things to remove because they're so tiny. It'll remove the viruses, it'll remove other contaminants, and it'll even remove some man-made chemicals that can end up in some of the treated wastewater. So this really is the workhorse of the process. And at the end of the day, makes the water of a almost ultra pure quality. And like I said before, this is the heart of the treatment. Now, because the holes are so small, it also does take probably 10 times the amount of energy and pressure to push the water through this filter compared to what it takes to push it through a microfiltration membrane. And then another thing to remember about this process, and we'll show you an animation next, I'll kind of give you an idea of how it works, is this process produces a clean stream and a dirty stream. So it's literally separating the solids and the contaminants into a separate stream that we can dispose of for a different purpose and treatment, and then retain the ultra pure water. And so let me show you what one of these looks like real quick. So here's a view of a cut open reverse osmosis membrane. Inside are several of these flat sheets, and the animation in the next slide will show you this a little bit better. They're stacked in here and then covered in a fiberglass shell. And then we can apply pressure at the end to force the water through these individual sheets and accumulate here in the hollow center as clean water. And then the contaminants will continue in a separate stream. And then we can send them through more filters. So we can collect more and more pure water and then generate the least amount of the waste stream possible in this process. So this really is one of the most important steps in our treatment here. So let me put the presentation back up and let's show a little video of what that looks like. So here's a little animation of what that looks like. So this is one of these RO membranes that has been cut open, and you'll see the individual flat sheets there. That's the membrane material we were talking about. It's made of a polymer, man-made polymer plastic called polyamide, very similar to the material used in the microfiltration membrane. If we apply pressure, you can see that the water will eventually make its way into one of these sheets and spiral to the hollow center, while what we call the concentrate, some people refer to it as brine, that's the waste stream where we separated out the contaminants, will come out in a separate stream. And then we'll collect that clean water, what we call the permeate, and send it on to the next treatment step. So let's take a look at what that step looks like. So the next step in the treatment, now remember we talked about there's 3 distinct treatment steps that lets us turn wastewater into drinking water in our process here at the Orange County Water District. The third step is what we call ultraviolet light, or ultraviolet light with hydrogen peroxide. And if you are studying some chemistry at school, you remember that hydrogen peroxide is a chemical that's what we call an oxidant. It's something that works as a disinfectant. When you combine it with something like ultraviolet light, which is a special type of light, you can generate a chemical reaction that will break down organics, because there are very small organics that can even make it through reverse osmosis, mainly man-made chemicals in particular, that we can then oxidize or change their chemical structure so that they change into something that's not a normal type of contaminant anymore. It becomes benign, so to speak, after this process. So this process involves thousands of individual lamps that put out a special wavelength of light, and that special wavelength of light not only destroys viruses or microorganisms that might have made it through the first two treatment steps, it also generates this necessary chemical reaction. So let me show you, before we have an animation of how it works, let me show you a little bit about what a lamp looks like. So those of you who might be in a classroom right now, you kind of see what we call a fluorescent bulb, what you see, you know, in the ceiling in your classrooms, almost exactly the same type of lamp, except that we put a special coating, the manufacturer does, to put out a certain wavelength of light. So if you remember from science, light comes in a broad spectrum, different wavelengths, different types of light. So we're trying to isolate two specific types of wavelengths that will allow this chemical reaction to occur. And so this is a process that's similar to what they would use in large aquariums. If you ever go visit a big aquarium, they need to keep that water disinfected and clean, but they can't add things like chlorine or chemicals because those are toxic to the fish that they're trying to maintain. So they can zap it all with light, so to speak. And so the way to think of this is when we have the hydrogen peroxide, we have high amounts of light, we can literally zap these organic molecules, kind of like a laser. So we'll kind of show that in the animation what that looks like. So this is all happening on a really microscopic scale and happening very quickly, you know, seconds for this reaction and this treatment to occur in this very last treatment step here. So let me show you a little video of what the advanced oxidation ultraviolet light process looks like. All right, so here's the water going through a chamber with lamps in it. And you can see that as this special light hits these organic molecules, it blasts them apart. Kind of reminds me of Star Wars, hitting something with my gun or with my laser. We're trying to blast them apart. And when we do this, we're breaking their chemical bonds and making them into a different chemical compound that isn't going to be of concern to us in terms of contamination, and essentially removed from the process to help further clean up the water. All right, so let's give you a little example of what we're talking about here. What would the water look like? So this is kind of what the water looks like after that first step, what we call microfiltration. So this is after one step. You can see it kind of has a bit of a color to it, but relatively free. You can't see anything and nothing floating in there because we've removed all the large particles with the microfiltration. And then this is what was removed. So think about it this way. This is what it looked like before. This is what we took out, but then we concentrate into 15% of its normal size. So we're basically squeezing out all the contaminants into a very, very small volume while collecting the clean stuff, which looks like this. So if you ever have the opportunity to come to Southern California and come tour Orange County Water District's Groundwater Replenishment System, you'll see a sink like this. You'll get to see what the water looks like before and after, and you'll even get a chance to taste it. So I encourage you, if you're ever in this area and want to come out here, we love having people over for tours. So let's show you a little bit of what that actually looks like in person here. So if you look at it, this is what the water looks like before. Kind of has a little bit of a color to it. If I put a little background behind it, you can see that the color that it has is kind of yellowy, like we showed in that first slide there. And then that second slide, we showed how we concentrate all of the contaminants into a very dark stream. And then what we should get is something like this, ultra pure water, you know, beyond drinking water quality. This is what we want to produce at the end of the day here. So that's what this process is meant to do. Take that water that would normally be discharged or not reused and reuse it. In this case, reuse it for the ultimate purpose, which is a new drinking water supply. Let's go on to the next. So although there are three main treatment steps, there is still kind of one extra step here. And again, this involves the chemistry of the process. So this is what we call post-treatment. Now, remember, we talked about that once we put the water through microfiltration, reverse osmosis, ultraviolet light with hydrogen peroxide, the water is now what we consider ultra pure from a chemistry point of view, meaning it's been stripped of all of its organics and most of its inorganics. So it's from a chemistry point of view, it needs to have some minerals put back in. That makes the water a little more stable, makes it less corrosive. So this is our process here. You can see some big tanks that we have. We could see these big towers that help remove some of the carbon dioxide. That's what's generated through the process. We add what's called lime, and it's not the lime that you put in your soda or that's in Sprite. It's a nickname that we call for calcium hydroxide. So that's a treatment chemical that we use. It's made from natural minerals, calcium, and calcium is one of the key minerals that we want to add back in so that the chemistry of the water is right. So we add the calcium hydroxide back in, does add a little bit of salt back to the process, but now the water is fully stable and ready for its ultimate use. And so when we've gone through all of these 3 treatment steps, remember, we want to take this water and put it back into the ground, into the groundwater. And so the best way to put it back into the ground is to put it in large lakes or ponds, which the Orange County Water District operates and other water agencies operate. In our case, they're in the city of Anaheim, which is, right next to Disneyland as well. And in those large lakes and ponds, we can put the water, it'll accumulate, and then by gravity, it will seep or it'll drain through the soil layer below and make its way naturally into the groundwater because the soil is very porous in that area. So we pick a specific area where the geology allows for water to easily seep or drain through the soil and get into the aquifer as quick as possible. So let me show you a video of one of the lakes. This is a lake that receives, this is called La Palma Basin. You can see the water coming in through the little waterfall there. You can see how crystal clear it is. This water can be as much as 15, 20 feet deep, and you can see right to the bottom because it's ultra pure quality. And so we have a series of lakes like this where we'll send the water that comes from this treatment plant, let it accumulate in these ponds, and it'll seep down into the groundwater several feet a day. So it's a very quick process, and we're just continually adding to it. And as we said before, the facility that we have here, the Groundwater Replenishment System, we're putting out 130 million gallons of water a day. So we're constantly putting out that much water just from this facility alone to help augment our other sources of water. This isn't the only one. We do rely on some natural sources of water. Specifically, we have a local river called the Santa Ana River that we also use. And then at times we can import water, bring water from outside of Southern California, from the Colorado River or from Northern California, and use some of those supplies. But with the groundwater replenishment system, now the water that we put back into the ground that helps become drinking water for 2.5 million people, we make up about 40% of that supply comes from recycled water. So that's a real nice way to help kind of drought-proof Southern California, so to speak, and help us make sure that this groundwater aquifer is sustainable and help us deal with climate change. But, as we started out at the beginning, I know that to some people, it's kind of funny or kind of weird, or how do you get wastewater and make it clean water? Or how do you get the poop out of there? I mean, it's the number one question I get asked by kids. So let me show you kind of a fun video that BuzzFeed did with us that'll kind of show introducing the concept just to people on the street and what's their honest opinion and then what's their opinion afterwards. So in this video, you'll see people that are trying our water compared to tap water and bottled water, but they don't know which one's ours, and their different reactions and kind of their their biases and their criticism of what they think it's going to taste like versus what it actually does. Because remember, with science, all water is the same. It doesn't matter whether it's water we're drinking today, water that was here when the dinosaurs were here. It's all the same water that through the water cycle comes back, goes through various levels of treatment, picks up contaminants, and we can retreat it again. So let's take a look at the video. I hope it's a little bit of fun thing for you to see how it really looks to people who have never seen it before.
Like people had pooped in the water and they cleaned it out and all that stuff, like our poop. That's cool. Thanks for giving me poop water.
We're here at the Orange County Water District Groundwater Replenishment System. This facility takes sewer water and treats it to beyond drinking water quality standards. The water comes in from the sewage treatment plant. We treat it through microfiltration to kind of remove the larger particles, and then it'll move on to the second treatment step, reverse osmosis. This removes everything down to distilled level quality. And there's still one more treatment step. This is basically just a redundant step to make sure we remove anything that's gotten through the first 2 steps, which we don't think will happen.
fact, we know it won't happen. Remember, ours is C.
Tastes like water.
I would guess this one came from the tap.
It's water. That's the good stuff.
So one of these waters was once sewage.
Oh my god!
Oh, that's cute.
Was it B? Was it B?
I'll go with B because it tastes a little funky.
I think B was once sewage water.
It was C.
Oh, interesting.
Oh my god, I can't believe that. It tastes good. Like, if I had to guess, I would say it was Fiji.
10 times out of 10, I'd rather drink sewage water over LA tap water. It's great. That's weird. That's really, really weird.
I don't know what I'm swishing around for. I don't know. Trying to get like a diaper or something in there. That's awesome.
I don't care. No, it's just it's poop water, you know? Like I know what's been in there. Even if it's all gone.
So as you saw in that video there, still, you know, it's hard to convince people sometimes, but I think once they see the science of it and they see what the water's been through, clearly we've done what we need to make the water just as potable as anything, whether that be bottled water or tap water. And just as an aside, that when that video was filmed, it was a few years ago, the last person that tastes the water, she's actually now a famous actress. She's in Abbott Elementary, but she was doing this when she was a struggling actress. They happened to find her as one of the people on the street. So one of the things we want, you know, we've been talking about all along is that we can take water that was once treated wastewater, turning into drinking water quality. And so the best way to kind of prove all of that it's, you know, it's safe and it's just like any other water is this is ultimately what we can produce. So the water is so pure that we actually do bottle it. And this is what, if you ever come for a tour, you can grab a bottle here, or we can send you a bottle. And remember, what ends up in this bottle started out as this, right? So it's gone through a lot to get it to this, and hopefully it tastes as good as any other water or better. Yep, tastes as good, just as good as it did when I first tasted it 15 years ago. So hopefully you can see that it's not that hard to take wastewater, turn it into drinking water as a sustainable way to deal with climate change and lack of water and water scarcity issues. And it does take science and technology, but we have the technology and, you know, we have the expertise to do it. And once people overcome some of the, you know, maybe their concerns, especially the psychological concerns, you'll see that it's no different than any other water. And if we're doing our job right, it won't taste any different either. So with that, I thank you for your time. Thank everyone for your attention. And, you know, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So thank you all very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mehul. That was really cool to see. And now I'm suddenly very thirsty. I don't know about any of you guys. So before we get into audience questions, we've already got a ton of audience questions, and there's still time for you to submit your questions. So drop those questions in the Q&A section on Zoom or in the comments section on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll try to get to them. But I've got a few questions for you before we jump into audience questions. One thing that I wondered is, so you're putting this purified water back into the ground. Doesn't it get dirty when you put it back in the ground? Do you have to refilter it when it comes back through? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a, you know, common question we get. Yeah, you know, so to speak, it does get a little bit dirty going through the soil and into it, but it is also mixing with naturally occurring groundwater. So even then, it's still very, very pure quality. But when the water is used for drinking water, which is usually by individual cities and their city water departments, they are pumping that water out of the ground, and then they will apply additional treatment as needed. Because this groundwater, particularly here in Orange County, is very clean and pristine and protected, most of the agencies that bring groundwater to their customers don't really have to add any additional treatment. They may just add a little bit of chlorine to help protect the water as it travels long distances to people's house, but it really doesn't get further contaminated just by putting it back in the ground.
Awesome. Thank you. I was
So we might have a little technical difficulty. We'll get Tara back. I think her feed's frozen. We'll have some more, we'll answer some more questions for you.
Go the next.
So we'll try to take a few audience questions here. I'll have my assistant Gina here help read me some questions. I'll try to answer those that we've gotten, at least in the Q&A session there.
Hi, Mehul. I have a question to ask.
Oh, you have one? Okay, great. Thanks, Ross.
Christina asked, Michael asked, how often do the filters need to be replaced?
That's a very good question. Yeah, like any filter, even the ones you may use in your home system, they do have to be replaced. The microfiltration gets replaced every 5 years, and so does the reverse osmosis membranes themselves. And then the ultraviolet light lamps get replaced every year, once a year. So we do have to account for that as part of our operation here and the expense of that. And so that's a key thing to remember there is you can't run any filter over its normal life, or you then won't get the same quality of water that you expect when it's new.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry guys, my internet popped out for a second there, but thanks Ralph for filling in. Let's see, we've got more questions coming in from our audience. And I'm very curious about this one. How long does it take for a drop of water to go through this entire process?
That's a really good question. So a drop of water going through our process here, microfiltration, reverse osmosis, ultraviolet light with hydrogen peroxide, and post-treatment takes about 3 to 4 hours. And then the water to go through the wastewater treatment process before us takes about anywhere from 15 to 20 hours. So within 24 hours or less, the water goes from raw sewage to what you saw today. So it's a very quick process.
Wow. Awesome. So here's a question from Julie. Why does the final purified water go beyond drinking water quality?
That's a good question. So I think the short answer is we want to produce the best quality water. So when you use something like reverse osmosis, when you're essentially removing almost everything down to the molecular level, you are going to remove more than you possibly have to meet normal drinking water quality standards. But we want to produce the highest quality water. And the reason for that is, one is obvious. We want to make sure that we've removed everything. Secondly, if we produce water of this quality, essentially, especially we talked about the salts are very, very low. By introducing this water back into the groundwater over time, we're diluting or naturally improving the groundwater quality, trying to make it less salty, because the naturally occurring groundwater definitely has higher salt content than this purified water we're putting back in.
Oh, interesting. This is one of my questions that I'm just curious about, pertaining to climate change and how we could maybe use this system in other places around the world. Is this like a replicable system that could be used in other drought-stricken regions, or is this kind of unique to Southern California?
No, it's a very good question. And yes, it's very much scalable or replicable. And that's why we get so many visitors here. This is done in Singapore, in Australia, parts of Israel. It's done in different parts of the world where they have the same issues, lack of water supply. It's done in other states in California, Arizona, Texas, Florida. There's several plants similar to this, smaller. Maybe the water's going to different places, but definitely it's scalable and it's replicable. And I think it's something that a lot of water agencies are looking at, especially in the desert Southwest here, where we're having more and more extended drought cycles. So it's very much a topic of interest. And even the regulators who regulate water quality are coming up with standards to allow for a greater use of it. And that's the ultimate, I guess, compliment that this technology and this process its day has come as someday becoming part of the normal water supply portfolio.
Awesome. Yeah, it seems like such a waste to not use all that water.
Right.
Here's a great question from the audience. So coming from Audrey, what happens to the concentrated waste?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the concentrated waste is sent back to the Orange County Sanitation District. It's mixed with some of the treated wastewater that still goes out to the ocean, and then it goes out about 5 miles out into the ocean, about 400 or 500 feet deep, and slowly over time dilutes and mixes out. So the way to think of it is it's the same constituents that would normally go out into ocean disposal for a wastewater treatment plant, we've just kind of stripped all the carrier water out of it. So we do have to monitor closely that ocean environment to make sure that the discharge of this waste stream is not doing anything to the aquatic environment. And so far it hasn't. And that's kind of what the main disposal source is for most of these plants that use reverse osmosis.
Awesome. Thank you. Speaking of the ocean, we did have a question about ocean water. Coming from Bo on YouTube. Does the same science work for ocean water? Can you purify ocean water?
Yeah, it's the exact same science, specifically the reverse osmosis. So you can purify ocean water. And as I mentioned a little bit in my presentation, it's very common in the Middle East because there is, very little drinking water supply, not that much wastewater generated because there isn't as high a population base. But it's energy intensive. So the thing to think about is when we're trying to use this process on treated wastewater, the salt content's much lower, about 1,000 parts per million of salt. When you're trying to desalinate seawater, it's 30,000, 40,000 parts per million. So not only does it take 5 or 6 times the energy, you only produce about half of the clean water you would if you were trying to treat a water like ours, a treated wastewater. So it is definitely one other option for increasing the drinking water supply. But this option takes a lot less energy, pressure, generates a lot less waste stream, but it is essentially the same technology that is used on seawater and could be used on seawater and is in other parts of the world.
Awesome. All right, let's see. We've got a question from Sarah on Zoom. Do you think we will ever have this type of system in our houses so we would not have to pump water in? Interesting. So just having like a contained unit in a house. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think, I think that's the ultimate goal someday, maybe, or maybe in more rural parts of the country or the world where there isn't a big centralized wastewater treatment plant to take everything and treat it and send it to a facility like ours. It's certainly possible. I think we're probably a couple decades away from even considering that. But, that would be the ultimate goal. And there's no reason you couldn't do it if the technology is the same. But, the way to think about it, too, is then operating and maintaining the technology is then on you as the homeowner. And so you have to have some expertise to operate it properly. And so that would always be the concern with doing that, but certainly possible.
Gotcha. Yeah. Don't want to mess up in this process. Awesome. Here's a question from Michael on Zoom. How often do these filters need to be replaced?
Yeah, so the microfiltration and the RO membranes, both every 5 years, typically, maybe a little longer depending on the wear and tear, and then the ultraviolet light lamps once a year.
Nice, cool. Ooh, great question coming from Michael as well on Zoom. How energy intensive is this process?
Yeah, so the reverse osmosis component is the most energy intensive. Just because we're trying to push water through such small pores or holes. Overall, it's still in Southern California, especially, it still takes less energy than trying to import water here, which is kind of our benchmark for energy consumption. It is one of the downsides of using reverse osmosis. It's energy intensive, but we do try to use it in the most energy efficient way possible by, using high efficiency pumps, trying to get the membranes that require the least amount of pressure, trying to maintain the equipment and run the microfiltration, which is the first step, as efficient as possible so that there's the cleanest possible water going into the RO or reverse osmosis, and then it operates more efficiently. So yeah, I think it's still energy efficient, but there are obviously more efficient processes, but then they can't do what this process can do. So that's one of the, the trade-offs that you have to look at.
Awesome. Great. Here's one from James on YouTube. Where do you get the wastewater from? Is it all sewage from homes, or is it coming from other sources as well? Great question.
That's a very good question. So the water that we get, the treated wastewater, comes from another agency called the Orange County Sanitation District, and they're located literally next door to our facility here in Fountain Valley, California. It is a combination. It's not just waste from your home. It's waste from businesses, or what we call industrial waste. So all of it comes, in our case, to centralized wastewater treatment plants, and we receive the treated wastewater from both of those plants. So it is a combination of both. And so that's why we want to have this 3-step process, because we not only want to deal with contaminants that come from normal household sewage, we want to be able to deal with chemicals or man-made contaminants that may be used in some of these factories or industrial places that discharge into the sewer as well.
Awesome. Cool. We have a question from Ryan about evaporation in a place as dry as Orange County. Do you worry about having all that pure water getting evaporated back into the atmosphere?
Yeah, I mean, we do worry about it, but it's a lot less than you think, maybe 5 or 10% at the most. And typically in the summer months is the highest, obviously, when it's hotter here. But as I said before, the percolation rate, or the rate at which it seeps, is so quick because it's so ultra pure that's kind of what helps us mitigate against that. It just goes in very, very quickly. So it doesn't sit for long periods of time to where it can be evaporated quickly.
Gotcha. Here's a question from Trinity. So she has a question about step 3. So the UV and hydration peroxide does step 3, the UV and hydration peroxide, remove endocrine disruptors that could be in wastewater?
Yeah, so the important thing to think about, endocrine disruptors, if you're not familiar with it, those are essentially hormones or other chemicals that can be discharged by the body either through taking certain medications or naturally occurring hormones or other pharmaceutical products. They are, believe it or not, quite large in size, and they're easily removed by the reverse osmosis. But yes, if there were to be something even smaller that passes through reverse osmosis, that is specifically what the ultraviolet light with hydrogen peroxide is for, is those are organic compounds, and we can essentially remove them by changing their chemical structure with the ultraviolet light and hydrogen peroxide chemical reaction.
Awesome. Great. I have one for future hydrologists in the audience and water engineers. What do you think is like the #1 skill or quality that has served you in your career path?
Ooh, that's a tough one. You have to like math. There's a lot of numbers involved. And so the numbers are not something to be afraid of. But yeah, if you have a propensity or you have a skill for math, or numbers don't scare you, you'll do especially well. The one thing I didn't mention, and maybe you'll learn this a little bit in school, is everything has units. If you remember, things are measured by gallons, by feet, by cubic feet. And so you have to be able to use math to convert between all three or several different types of units, and that comes in handy. But and then of course, like I said before, any love of science helps, because it is a scientific process at the end of the day. There is some art to it, I would say, but I guess it's primarily math and science.
Awesome, cool. I'm sure a lot of problem solving involved as well.
Yes. Yeah,
well, we've got a final question. How can folks learn more about your work and stay in touch after today's session?
Yeah, so I think the easiest and fastest way is visit our website, ocwd.com. In there, we have not only all the information that you saw today, a lot of it, we have reports, we have videos, we have other literature. My contact information's there. You can always contact me directly by email. We answer a lot of public questions that come through, either directly to me or through our public affairs group that handles it. And that's the same place that you could even, like I said, if you're in our area, schedule a tour. So I think visit our website. It'll give you a lot of information. And if not, we can always get you the contact information for the water district.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mehul. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much to everyone who has been posting these amazing questions. We had a ton of just awesome engagement here. So pat yourself on the back for that. That was awesome. And many thanks to our funders, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, as well as the Nova Science Trust and GBH Planet Future Fund. If you're interested in seeing Mehul on TV, definitely check out Weathering the Future. You can stream that on Nova's website, YouTube, or on the PBS app today. And if you want to learn more about the steps that are being taken to address the root cause of climate change, which is greenhouse gas emissions, definitely also check out Nova's Chasing Carbon Zero. That just premiered last night, and you can also stream that on the streaming platforms, which I just mentioned. Both of these films, as well as this virtual field trip, are part of Nova's Climate Across America initiative, and you can follow us and join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag Climate Across America. All right, and stay tuned for another virtual field trip. We'll be doing this again very soon, also about climate change. So do follow Nova Education for updates about that, as well as future events and opportunities. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful day. Mm-hmm.